Hello, merhaba. So I have a bunch of books here, like basically books that I recently bought, which are kind of all over the place. And then I have books that I have on my shelf. I haven't actually finished touring my shelf. It's probably only halfway done, maybe like 30%, 40%. I'd say 45% of it's done. So this is going to be some library books and basically books I got in my last book haul because my last book haul was rather big. So the first one is Good Reasons for Bad Feelings, Insights from the Frontiers of Evolutionary Psychology. It's a very interesting book. I wasn't looking for it. I just saw it in the bookstore and I thought, wow, that is a very cool idea. What are some of the adaptive properties of bad emotions? Haven't read it yet. The next one is Psychotherapy and Its Practice. This is another Jung book. As I said like many times now, I'm going to get all of the Jungian psychology books, and I'm going to read them all. And this is one of the books that was on there. I got this one for a steal because on the Routledge website it was, I think, $60. No, I think it was like $40, and I got it for like $25. So I definitely got it for cheaper. Maps of Meaning. Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson. I got this book because I want to read all of Peterson's books. I suspect, I have another one of his here, but I suspect this will be nothing like his 12 Rules for Life, because I feel like in 12 Rules for Life, he kind of pulls back on his like esotericism. But since this is supposed to be like the book that he worked on for 10 years and is considered like his masterpiece, I suspect this will be really, really esoteric. So I have Goddesses in Every Man, or Every Woman. This is Gods in Every Man, the archetypes that shape men's lives. She has a bunch of books. I think she has 4. I have 3 of them now, and this is the last one I needed for... this is the counterpart to Goddesses in Every Woman. I have Goddesses in Every Woman. Haven't read it yet. The Spirit and Man, Art and Literature, another Jung book. I believe this one is actually not technically a book. I believe it was put together. It's just a bunch of his essays and writings. So for example, he has a whole essay on like Freud and how Freud can be understood in relation to literature, how analytical psychology relates to poetry, stuff like this. I'm not going to even try and pronounce this correctly. An introduction to the history, the classic Islamic history of the world. I believe this person was considered a famous historian, or attributed to being like really important to history. I don't know. There's something. Basically, anybody from the Middle East tells me to read this person all the time, and so I finally got one of their books. I'll read this one, and then we'll see where it goes from there. The Frontiers of Knowledge. So I got his History of Philosophy. I'm currently collecting a bunch of histories of philosophy, and I saw that he had another book, and since his History of Philosophy was on the shelf and I saw that this was there, I was like, okay, well, I'll get this too. It sounds interesting. Okay. Karl Marx, Capital, Volume 1. Very thick. I believe this one is 1,093 pages. I've said I'd never read Marx, and I've since come to change my mind, and now I'm going to read Marx, which is why I also have Volume 2 and Volume 3. So I have all 3 of the Capital books that I'm going to read. So the next one is On War. This is basically, if you could think of like somebody who was trying to communicate the nature of war between empires and nation states, and how the nature of war is changing between empires and nation states, where you go to like more organized regiments, get into things like artillery and stuff, and officer corps and stuff. That's what this book kind of is. I've only gone through little parts of it, but I saw it in the bookstore and I figured, well, that's a timely book, so I'll get that. Next one, Discourse on Methods and the Meditation. So Descartes did a terrible job at naming his books, because every time I saw a Descartes book in the store, I had to ask myself, do I already have this book? So Meditations and First Philosophies is a completely different book. And this book I got now because it's Discourse on Method and Meditations, which is not the same thing as Discourse and Meditations on First Philosophy. And then this book also, Meditations and Other Metaphysical Writings, is also a new book, or like a completely separate book. So I got these two because they were in the store, and after spending 15 minutes of Googling Descartes' writings, I realized, wait, I don't have these. The Wizard and the Prophet. This is basically, so I want to get into like sustainability, environmental sciences, so on and so forth. This is a book that covers the balance between like engineers and like people who are like pro-environment and stuff, and how there's been a happy compromise between the two, or like a happy equilibrium between innovation and environmental sciences, or like being environmentally friendly. And this book explores all that stuff. The Idiot by Dostoevsky. So I read The Demons. I just finished that maybe like 2 weeks ago. And this will be the next book I'm going to read by him. I don't actually know what it's about. Beyond Order. So this book is the last Peterson book after Maps of Meaning that I'll have to read. And I suspect it's going to be super overrated. I read some of the basically first paragraphs of like each one of the chapters. I get the impression it's very much like 12 Rules for Life. We'll see. But since I already have 2 other Peterson books, and this is his last one, I just figured I'd get it and give it a read, and then do a review. The History of Philosophy, 3 Millennia of Thought from the West and Beyond. So this is the History of Philosophy book I was talking about. Because I'm writing the second edition of my first book, it's good to get, because I'm adding a second chapter, or like another chapter, where I talk about the history of philosophy, and so I thought it would be good to just immerse myself in the history of philosophy literature so I can have maybe some interesting facts readily available in my mind while I'm writing. Benjamin Franklin, Walter Isaacson. This is a great book because it's a Walter Isaacson book. I haven't read it yet, but this is, well, it was going to be the last Walter Isaacson book I had to read, but now that he's doing a biography on Elon Musk, I'll have to read that as well. But then again, I'm not a big fan of... Not that I dislike Elon Musk, I'm just not a super big fan of him. Sufism, A New History of Islamic Mysticism. So I'm getting a bunch of books on Islam, not because I am religious, not because I'm trying to convert. I simply want to study all the world religions, or all the religions that are predominant. I've studied some Christianity because I grew up in Canada. I've studied Catholicism. I have not studied Islam formally, and I'm studying Taoism as well, so it's just one of the books I had to get. Another one was The House of Islam, A Global History. I believe this is less about the doctrines of Islam, but more so about like the sociology of Islam. A Short History of Islam. She also has a book called A Short History of God. Yeah, I figured I would just get this because it was really cheap and it wouldn't hurt. Salafi Jihadism, The History of an Idea. So I believe this is just going to cover some of the more extremist interpretations or uses of Islam. And then this is going to be a straight up introduction to Islam, where it's going to go over things like the 5 pillars and so on and so forth. Then I have 2 copies of the Quran, but they're not here. So now we can do the biology part of this video. The first book is going to be The Origins of the Species. I have like 3 copies of Origins of the Species. I don't know where this copy came from. I'd prefer the small copy. I don't like how this book feels, but it's aesthetic at least, right? Wildlife, Ecology and Management. This is an old book from university. Yeah, just a textbook. Book on Human Anatomy, nothing special. Essential Biochemistry. This is a really, really great biochem book because the last time I studied biochem was a really long time ago. So when I was getting back into like the study of genes and chemistry and so on and so forth, I got this book just as a refresher, and it's one of the better biochemistry textbooks I've seen. The Principles of Neuroscience. This is basically like a holy bible of neuroscience. I don't know if this is 6th edition yet, just to give you a sense of how big it is. It's, I think, 2,300 pages, something ridiculously big. You can also just get it as a reference book. It was very cheap when I got it. It was only like $40. You can basically open it up and then just find, okay, well, I want to read about like neural firing, or I want to read about like color perception, or whatever, right? You can just go whatever part of the brain you want to study about, open it up, read through that, Great reference book. Evolutionary Biology. This is a really old book. It's a 1993 book, but when I got it, I was looking up which books were like the best for evolutionary biology. And surprisingly, everybody referenced this book, this really, really old book. They said the new textbooks are not even close to being this good. So I took their word for it, and it is a great book. The next one is another biology book, or I guess you could say chemistry. This is just an introduction to chemistry. Again, I was going through like refreshers, and this is one of the textbooks that was highly recommended. These books are really big. Biology, A Global Approach, just in like a general overview of biological sciences. Biodesign, in nature, science, creativity. So biodesign, nature, science, creativity. Basically, like, what are some of the applications of designing things through biology? Whether it's like growth of algae or, for example, building apartments that are covered in trees. It's more like a concept book rather than like things that are in practice. That being said, this book, I would argue, has a lot of proof of concept, but not a lot of implementation. Because the book will always cite studies where like something they were trying to do was achieved on a smaller scale. Another textbook, Molecular Biotechnology, Principles and Applications of Recombinant DNA. Another big book. I'm not sure if this is the best one in its area, but it's not a bad one. The Cell. This is like another book that everybody loves. It's just molecular biology, like introduction, but everybody loves it. Even like PhD students love to just read through it because it's so detailed. Yeah, this is a terrific book. And then the last one I'm going to show for the textbooks is Visualizing Human Biology. This was a very old book from like my first year of either like the grade 12 or the first year of university, one of the two. Now the last books I'll show here aren't really textbooks, so they're still biology books. Obviously a very classic series, a short introduction to the genes, short introduction to the cell. A Concise Biology, so those are some of the small books. Another one is Trouble with Testosterone, Essays on the Biology of Human Predicament by, what's his name, Robert Sapolsky. Everybody loves his Behave book. This is another great book, I loved it. Epigenetics, a graphic guide. When Death Becomes Life, Note from a Transplant Surgeon. I guess this isn't really biology. Sustainable superabundance. It's more about sustainability than it is about biology. Laboratory techniques in microbiology. Darwinian populations and natural selection. I wanted to get into like population genetics and how people think about natural selection on the level of the population. Peter Godfrey Smith is a great writer. His Philosophy of Science book was really good. Pleasure, The Compass of Pleasure. So like if you know nothing about pleasure in the brain, I guess get this book, but it's really basic. There's some interesting studies in it, but it is extremely, extremely basic. This is a used book. I bought it from a library, and it's basically about how genes relate to mood. And I thought it was interesting, but I actually haven't read it yet. So I don't know if I'll ever read it, to be honest. The Longevity Diet. This is a great book. I've since incorporated fast mimicking into my own diet, where you do like a 3 or 5 day fast, where the fast is actually just heavy amounts of caloric restriction. You're not actually not eating any food. And there's a lot of research to support that in this book. The Accidental Brain. This is a great book if you think that the brain is just this intelligently designed organ, because there are tons of things in here where, for example, people who are doing mathematics will experience sexual impulses because some of the neurons responsible for sexual impulse accidentally become, basically when you're doing math, ions can leak into neural parts of the brain that are responsible for sexual impulse. And so because there's these leaky ions, you also can think about sex when you're doing math. That was one of the interesting studies mentioned in here. The Brain Maker, I haven't read this yet. People said it's a good book. The Senses, I got this when I was in university because I was collecting this series, and this is one of the books in the series. It is a very old approach to physiology. You can definitely get something more modern, and the book has a really funny smell. But if you just want like the rudiments of physiological sciences as they relate to the senses, then go ahead and get this. How Evolution Explains Everything About Life. If Our Bodies Could Talk. And that's the last ones. So those are my new books, because there's so many of them, and my biology books. But I have another biology shelf. That being said, bye-bye.